Hi there makers, it is Jo here from Minerva and I'm continuing with a little mini cover stitch series which has been asked for quite a lot, and it's been requested that I show a few techniques for using a cover stitch machine. You need to decide if you think you need one or not. There's lots of content out there to give you the pros and cons of using a cover stitch machine, but today I'd like to show you how to chain stitch. Chain stitch is when you use one needle to create a seam. It's not tied off, so that's a little thing to check out. We need to make sure that if you are chaining, you get the top stitch on the right side and it doesn't come undone. You can use a chain stitch as a top stitch, so if you just want a single row of stitching rather than a double or a triple row, you use the one needle for a chain stitch. And you can also sew seams together. You can sew them together temporarily, or you can sew them together as a seam that you will use, and then you can overlock the edges. I'm not sewing a garment today, I'm just sewing some samples to show you how the machine works. Your machine might be slightly different. I won't be threading up the machine because with a Primo it's a jet air threader, so if I press the button you'll just see the thread scoop through and it won't help you to thread any other cover stitch machine. It's also auto tension, so I can't show you how to use the dials because that's all done within the machine. If you've got a machine and you're struggling to thread it up, go back to your manual, look for a YouTube video specific to your model and manufacturer type, or you may need to go back to the dealer. First of all, what is a cover stitch machine? Well, a cover stitch machine is predominantly for hemming and especially for knits. It gives you 2 or 3 layers of top stitching on the right side, and it will give you a covered stitch on the back, so one looper will cover over the raw edge of your fabric. A cover stitch machine doesn't really do anything any different that you can do on your normal sewing machine. It's just faster and quicker, and you can keep your machine all set up. You can use different threads on here so that your loop at the back is more filled in and more decorative, or you can have the decorative cover stitch on the right side. It's different to an overlocker because there's no blade. You've got more footbed space to put your work in different positions. You're not just working on the raw edge. It gives a very stretchy seam, so if you're working with activewear, dancewear, gym wear, or any kind of stretchy fabrics, it will make your hem super stretchy so it won't pop when you put it over your head with an item that has negative ease. I will also show you in this video how to put a neckband on, so you can use a single top stitch, that's the chain stitch, or you can use 2 needles or 3 needles depending on the finish that you would like. Today I'm making the Saybrook tank from Cashmere Patterns. It's a really useful vest top and it uses stretch knit fabric. Today I'm using a cotton rib. A rib fabric is really stretchy and sometimes tricky to control, but under a cover stitch machine you won't get any rippling or wavy stretched out seams, necklines or armholes. Make up the shoulders and the sides of your vest and then join up the short ends of your neckband, and then you're going to quarter it with the key points around the neck, so the centre back, the centre front, and match up the shoulder notches. The binding is right sides together with the right sides of the top. If you've got any seam allowances, make sure they're opened out and distributed, and then start to take in the ease between the pins. Once you've done that, you can then attach your binding to your neck hole in a couple of ways. You can use a stretch stitch on a sewing machine, or we're going to chain stitch around the outside. Need to make sure that we finish with a knot. Now that it's on, hasn't got any puckers or ripples in it, and we need to make sure that we press that seam allowance up towards the binding. We're going to fold the binding over once and then stitch just below the binding on the top. We're going to sew from the right side but catch the wrong side, so open out any seam allowances, and I'm going to pin with my pins out on the folded edge so that I can pull them out from the other side. I'm going to sew here, can pull those out, and the binding will be attached and covering over the seam allowance. I'm just going to keep checking the distance there because I'm going to be sewing that from the right side, so I won't see if I'm catching the reverse. But once it's all pinned like this, you can check any measurements. Ordinarily, if you folded it over like that, you'd get a really chunky neckband, but this way everything lies really flat and slim. It's at this point now that you can add a label if you want to, but because you're sewing blind, you might need to put a little bit of temporary glue on your label because you'll be sewing it from this side, so you won't see whether you're catching it or not. To start stitching the neck, we need to make sure that we're not in the chain because we want to be able to get that fabric underneath. So we're going to release the threads so that we have the 2 needles and the looper thread coming out from the side of the machine. If the last action you did was chaining off, then if you want to hem, you'll notice that here the threads from the needles are going down into the foot plate, and that's in order to create the chain. So what we need to do is release those threads because I can't get my hem under here because it's hitting those threads. To release the threads, I'm going to hold the chain and turn the hand wheel forwards and then keep going forwards until the needles are in the highest position, and then turn the hand wheel back away from me and it will release the threads and stop the chain. Cut this off now, and my threads are free and I've got all of this space now so that I can position my work and it can go underneath. Position your work so that your right hand needle is nice and close to the edge of your binding, but it's on the top, but taking that second layer from the reverse. If you want to adjust and maneuver your fabric, keep the needles down, otherwise you'll get a skip stitch, and take it nice and steady. When you get back round to where you started, just give your threads a little tug just to check that they're not going to unravel. And then you want to keep those out of the way so you don't get a little knot on the top. And you're going to match up your twin needles back up to these twin needle lines that you made in the first place. You don't want to scoot off the edge now, you don't want any stitching on your binding, so you're going to roll the hand wheel towards you to get the needles in the highest position, lift the foot and then turn back the hand wheel to release the stitches. And you need to be a little bit delicate here with these because you want to tie off the loopers on the back so that everything doesn't come unravelled. Okay, so you've got a really professional neck binding. You might have had a label in there. If you've got any inaccuracies, got a little bit more fabric just there. If that really bothers you, then you can take those extra bits out with duck-billed scissors. But the key is that you've caught it all the way around, so there's nowhere that has a loose binding. I'm going to take a little bit off there, not for perfection purposes, but that will just reduce the bulk a bit for when I put the arm binding on as well. So you can put arm bindings on, neck bindings, and you can get that really beautiful double top stitch and a really smooth inside. It lies much flatter than if you roll your binding over and fold it again because you've reduced one of the folds in the neckband. If you've got a cover stitch machine since making something, so this is a t-shirt that I like to wear a lot, but that neck binding which I put on with a zigzag stitch on the machine and then overlocked, it always flips up. I can never get it to sit down flat. You can also return to this even though you've got the overlock on the back, you can put the cover stitch on top. So I'm going to sort of revisit this top, add the 2 layers of top stitching, and you'll see that I'll get the detail on the top and it will hold that binding down flat at the back. As a revisit, that's brilliant. It's given me 2 lines of top stitching to highlight that slightly unusual collar, and it's holding everything downhill, so that's not popping up anymore. And I've got the cover stitch backing and the overlock, but that doesn't matter. It's just made that top much more wearable and less bulky around the neckline. Here's the top finished with the armholes included. It's really professional. It's got a super finish on both the outside and the inside. It's nice and stretchy, so you can go over your head and round your armholes with comfort. It looks superb here on the shoulders because you've only got a single layer of binding rather than a chunky lump of a folded over edge. And you can also cover stitch hem the bottom. This is the Saybrook tank. On a cover stitch machine, you can also work with 1 needle, and that's called a chain stitch, and you can use that for top stitching, a single line. You can also use it for putting seams together. For chain stitching, you need a looper thread and 1 colour. That's going to be the colour that you will see on your seam if it's a little bit loose. So you want this one to be the best thread match colour. This one is going to be on the back of your fabric. Pull your looper thread through. In my case, it was an air thread, so it's popped out the bottom of the foot plate. And on my machine, I can chain stitch on needles 1, 2, or 3. So I've got my chain stitch needle number 3 in today. In order to get the threads through the machine, I just put a little bit of fabric underneath, and that pulls the thread and the looper thread into the correct position. I'm ready to chain stitch. I'm going to sew up this seam. It's on a stretchy fabric, but you can also use the chain stitch on any woven fabric, so the cover stitch machine isn't just for stretch fabrics. I can use the guide here to make sure that my seam is in the correct place. Can position my needle and sew. And you will see here is the single chain stitch, and you need to chain off. And it looks like you're machine sewing. So from the one side, you've got a line of straight stitching, but on the reverse, you've got a chain stitch. One of the key things to note when you're using a chain stitch is that the end where you finish is live. So if I cut this off, it could start to unravel. So you'll need to make a little knot at the end of your chain stitch seam lines before you cut your threads. If you want to unpick a chain stitch, you need to know where you came off. So where was the end of your chain stitch? It only works from one direction. Release the looper, and you can undo your stitching. That's why it's really great for fitting, because you can put together a garment on your cover stitch machine, check your side seams, for example, and then if it's not right, you can pull it back really quickly. You will want to do a test piece first to check that you've got your stitches tight enough. Now these are too loose, look, got space in between, so I can make my stitch length shorter. If I've got a stretchy fabric, I might change my differential feed to make sure I'm not getting a wavy hem. If I'm using a light fabric, I might change my differential feed so I can stop all of the fabric from puckering up. The differential feed on a cover stitch is exactly the same as a differential feed on a overlocker, so you can change here. For knit fabrics, you might need to move your differential up. If your fabric is stretching out and it's a knit, you need to go down. And if your fabric is gathering up, you need to go down a little bit more. You can play with a chain stitch, so you can use it as a top stitch. Here you'll get a thicker line. You can have 2 different colours of thread. On a Primo machine, you can also thread the wipers here and add a decorative stitch on top of the chain stitch, but that's really specific to the Baby Lock Primo. So you can use your machine as a sewing machine by using the single needle on a chain stitch. If you use your chain stitch across the stretch of the fabric, you will lock the fabric off. So you can see here, I've got the stretch, but where I've sewn across the ribs, it has secured the fabric. So if you need a stretchy seam here, you're best to use an overlocker. A Maraflex thread with a straight stitch on your sewing machine or a zigzag on your sewing machine. So there are a few things to think about if you want to use a chain stitch. You could use this to go round the top of neckbands and armholes like I just showed you, so you don't have to have twin needle. You can have a single needle. And follow the curve of your neckline for top stitching. Get a little bit of give where it goes across the grain, but it's not quite as stretchy as the twin needle cover stitch. It is great, however, for woven fabrics on a loose fitting garment. For those that like to ask, today I'm wearing a Billy sweatshirt from Tilly and the Buttons. It's the sweatshirt version. It's got a set-in sleeve rather than a raglan or a drop sleeve, so you get a slightly neater sort of silhouette of a sweatshirt. This print is called Motley Mosaic, and the base cloth is a fleece back recycled sweatshirt fabric. It's got a little bit of a sheen to it, and I've used my cover stitch machine to add some decorative details where I've used the cover stitch reverse as the bit that I'd like to see. This one has thumb cuffs, but I've just got it folded back for working with. It's got a hemband, and I've added some stitching across here too. Hope that little tutorial has helped you today get your chain stitch started, especially if you've been making a chain stitch and it keeps coming undone. We've got another video coming up for cover stitch machine details where I'm going to show some decorative stitches, but for now, thank you very much for watching.